Hi, I'm Greg Summers. Today the project of the day is going to be a plant stand, and it's going to be a twig type plant stand made from natural tree limbs and extra pieces of wood that have been laying around the house for a while. Remember now, it's a plant stand. It's not a stool or a step. It's something you want to set something on to display it, but not yourself. First thing you need to do is decide how big the top of the stand is going to be. And I usually let the wood determine that. I'm using a piece of sugar maple here. Happens to be 9 inches wide, so I think the top of it should be about 12 inches long. So the first thing I'll do is mark that off. So we have a 9 by 12 seat. I'm going to take a square here, mark it across that way, so I have that. And then the next thing I need to do is cut that piece out so I have it ready to go. And we'll go to the bandsaw and do that. Okay, first thing I need to do is adjust it to make sure it's set for the right height. And we'll turn it on. Guide the wood in right along the line. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can use a hand saw, a saber saw, circular saw, any type of saw you have. So now we have the material here for the seat, and I'm actually going to make another piece the same size, and that's going to be for the tray underneath it. So I'll mark that piece off using the same wood, or the piece that I'm going to use for the top. And I'll go back and recut that. So now I have a piece that's going to be used for the bottom of the tray underneath, and then a piece for the top of the bench. So we have two of them. They're both the same size. The next thing we have to do now is decide what we're going to use for legs. And what I use is tree limbs. I was in the woods this morning, found a couple down trees, and then picked up the pieces that I think I'm going to need here. And this is one of them. I like to get ones that are a little bit distinctive, that stand out a little bit and have a little bit of character to them. These all have bark on them. You can decide if you want to take the bark off or leave the bark on. Debarking is a pretty long process, and I'll just show you a part of it. I just take a knife and just simply start cutting away. And when you do this here, you expose the layer of wood underneath, and you get a lot different color pattern to it. So you just keep cutting through and remove that. So if you use a knife, be careful. You can use a file. You can sand it. Sometimes the bark itself will just peel off if it's been weathered correctly, and so you just simply cut through like that. Sometimes I take a piece of rough sandpaper and I just sand it down till I get a smoother finish than what the bark has. And other times, especially with hickory and smooth bark trees, I just leave it on and then put a nice coat of varnish on everything, and that tends to make it look pretty good. So the bark part is an option for you. Decide what you want to do. So we got 4 legs here. I have to decide now how the legs are going to go. Are they going to be spread out a little bit? Normally they are. About 5 degrees is the best way to do that. If you look at this bench down here, the legs are spread out a little bit. So I have to kind of set up a jig for that. And what I do is I take a scrap piece of wood. I take the piece I'm going to use for the top. And I simply take these pieces here and I nail them on and work all the way around it. So I have something to hold the legs in the position that I want them to be at. There's one. Go over here, put one in here. I know you're probably seeing something about my hammer, but sometimes you just use what you have and it works out all right.
That's from the Bronze Age?
Yeah, this is an old soft face hammer I picked up at a yard sale somewhere. So what can I say? it works. Okay, so this is how far apart I want the legs to be at the base. And so when I set a leg in here, it's going to be like this, and also it's going to be angled in a little bit. So I've got to decide what the height of the bench is going to be, because these pieces then have to be cut off at the correct height. And what I think I'm going to do, I believe I'm going to make this particular plant stand about 12 inches tall. So if I measure from the base, and what I've done on the bottom of all these, I've cut them off already and I've kind of rounded them around a little bit to get them started. Normally they're sanded and rounded over a little bit more, or filed or cut or whatever you want to do to get them to that position, but once you round them over, that makes it sit a little bit better no matter what position you put it in. If you have it cut straight off, then sometimes it just looks like it's sitting in an angle, and it makes it easier to do it that way. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is take these legs and decide I want them to be about 12 inches long, and there's my pencil. So what I have to do now is I'm going to cut them all off at that particular height. And I'm only cutting the part that's going to be the leg. I'm not cutting these pieces here. And you probably wonder what these are for. These are simply just, well, yeah, they're tree limbs. That's right. But these pieces are going to be attached to the other legs or to the seat, and that reinforces it. It's an angled brace, and it gives it more strength, so it makes it more rigid. So I mark 12 inches where my top is going to be at, and then I have to cut that particular piece off. You got to be careful when you cut, especially like on a bandsaw. A handsaw is a lot easier to use, because on a bandsaw the wood has to be flat on the table. If it's not flat on the table, if I set it like this, once it starts to cut through, it'll collapse and grab a hold of the blade. So I've got to turn it over and get it set so that the wood itself is going to be on the table. And there's the first piece there. This dictates the height of my bench, and then the seat's going to be on top of that. It's about an inch, so it's going to be another inch higher. And this starts the process of deciding where everything is going to be at. Since I have 4 legs, then I have to cut off 4 pieces. And
Isn't the thickness?
pardon?
Is the thickness different for each one?
Each piece of wood is a different thickness this way. Yeah, but that doesn't seem to matter as long as you get all of them to be about the same size. Okay, so now we're going to cut the rest of the legs to make sure they're all the same length. And I have one more leg that doesn't have any angles on it. Okay, so now I have the 4 legs that I intend to use, and they're going to be situated inside this frame here, so this gives me an idea where I want this to be at. We're going to leave these go for right now. Excuse me for ducking down there. And now I'm going to take the piece that's going to be the top, and I have to do some drilling here to mark where the legs are going to be at. Each leg, when it goes up into the top, then is going to be just a little bit inset inside, about like that, so you have to kind of decide, and then it's going to angle out away from the bench. So what I have to do is find a spot where it's going to be at, and then I have to pre-drill that area so I have a nice flat spot to fasten it to. And we're simply going to use screws to go through the top to fasten into the legs. Since most of the pieces here are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter, all I have to do is I'm going to measure in 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches both ways, and do the same thing on all four corners. Take a square, transfer that measurement. What I'm doing is finding the center where I'm going to drill at, and also where the screw is going to come in from the top. Okay, if you can see that now, I've got 4 locations marked, and that's where we're going to set up for the legs to go. And that's an operation we're going to use a hand drill for. So I'll set these pieces out of the way. I'm going to use this frame that I made here to help me do my drilling. And I'm going to take a regular 1/2-inch drill here, plug it into something that works. And I'm going to set a spade bit inside the drill. Actually take this one here. Okay, now I'm going to get ready to drill. Now what I have to do, and the important part about drilling is you don't drill straight down. You have to decide the legs are going to be splayed out about 5 degrees, and it's 5 degrees is an angle away from the center. So if I took a ruler and actually marked the center of the board here, I can draw diagonals and do the same thing, but I'm going to take and draw a line out this way. This points to the angle that we want to drill from. So we're drilling from these 2 corners, or a compound angle. And that's the only thing, and it's not real critical, but it gives the piece of wood a nice little place to sit. So I'm going to simply go and decide this is straight here. I'm going to angle out towards the corner and drill into it until I get a relatively flat surface just like that, and then go to each one of them. They're straight, angle out. There's 2. There's 3. And there's 4. So now I have the 4 holes that I need to have for that. And since we're here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and drill the rest of the way through for the screws that are going to be in there. Okay, now since we have those surfaces cut for the legs to set into, now I'm simply going to take a bit that has a pilot and a shank hole already built into it. Looks like this here, and also it countersinks itself, so I can put a wood plug on top of that and cover everything up once we're done. So I might as well do 3 operations at once. It's good always to put a hole through there because the wood will probably split. So the first thing I'll do is just simply drill straight through so I can get through the other side. Do that on all 4 of these. This particular bit has lines cut into it. If you can see these here, and those are depth lines, and so you can decide how deep you want to go with that. I'm going to turn it over. Here are my holes now that are coming through, and I'm simply going to go straight down. And then I'm going to do a little countersink. 1. 2. 3. Oh, I missed it. Okay, I'm lucky. Okay, so now we have the holes in the top where the screws are going to go down to. We have little bosses or flat surfaces for the legs to sit onto, and that holds them in place a little bit better. So we have that part done. And when you start this process, things look a little bit hectic when you start anchoring everything together, but then you finally get them to line up and you have a better idea where everything is going to go. This part here is what we're going to use now. We're going to take a leg and we're going to screw it into the top surface here and start putting this together, see what it's going to look like. Okay, I need a break. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we need to take each leg then and we're going to drill a pilot hole into it. Since this is just regular lumber or wood that you pick up in the woods, has a moisture content that's probably about 20%, 25%. The wood you buy in the store is about 10 to 14%. So this has a lot of water in it and it tends to shrink and it tends to crack. So if you drill a pilot hole for the screw to go into, the chances of it cracking are a lot less. So you always have to realize that this is material that we're using that isn't processed, it's just natural wood. And so you have to kind of allow for that. So we're going to drill a pilot hole now in the top of each piece for the screw to go down into. And a pilot hole is a good idea for basically any time you put a screw in a piece of wood, it keeps it from splitting out. So we set this bit in here, and it's a regular twist drill bit. Nothing fancy about it. I'm simply going to take the leg and about towards the center of each one I'm going to drill in. And there's one. I suppose I don't have to count since you can count before. So. I suppose as you watch the shows, if you have any questions or comments or any requests, you can always feel free to write in or call in. And we'll see if we can honor some of those. Okay, now we have a pilot hole in each one. Each one of these pieces is going to go down into here. Oh, look at that. That one's too long. Okay. So what we have to do then is eventually we will cut these, but we're going to just situate them and see how they look. Usually with a plant stand like this, the three sides are filled in a little bit with braces and then one side is left open so you can use the shelf underneath to put something in there. Okay, now we're ready to put some screws in. And I'm using just a simple galvanized, it's kind of like a drywall screw. And they seem to hold pretty well. They resist any rusting, so they work out real well. And they're easy to take out or tighten down if you have to. All right, got kind of a mess here. I'm going to set these aside. Take the first one, that's always the tricky one. Take the screw, put it into the hole that we've already drilled, and then take the leg. And set the pilot hole, or the screw into the pilot hole. And then run it in there. I'm not going to snug it down too much, I just want to get it held in place. Okay. Alright, there's the first one. Now what this actually is telling me here now, since this one is snugged in, this piece will need to be cut at this angle so that it'll fit onto the top then. So what I'm going to do is mark it so I know where it goes. You know what, I was just thinking, what the heck, let's go ahead and cut that one just for the fun of it. So I'm just going to back that out. I have my line there, go over here to the drill press. It's not a bandsaw. And cut that piece off. And let's see what happens now. We're going to put it back on. Okay, so now we have that one where it's going to lock into the piece right there like that. So, hey, that's great. Good way to go. Let's go to the second leg then. Let's see, we want to have one here. Let's put this one about like that. Yep, I think that'll work. Now remember, these pieces, they always look kind of clumsy when you first start out, simply because they're not locked in. And I knew something was wrong. Okay, now we have another one set in place. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that one. Go back to the bandsaw. Get it as flat as I can. I don't like that. The nice thing about working with this type of wood is that since we heat with wood, if I make a mistake, then I get to use it for something else, and so that'll probably go in the wood stove later on. Okay, that one's locked in. This one has to be, it's going to have to move it out a little bit, and we'll probably end up shaving that off, but it has to be out of the way of the next leg. Now I've got to decide here. I've got these kind of like this. It's going to go in like that. This is where I want to be open, this side here. So the next piece, is that right, or did I do it wrong? Next piece then is going to be angled the opposite way on this side. I think that'll be the one we'll use. So we'll take the next screw. Wow, that looks ugly, doesn't it? Okay, what are we going to do? Let's take and we'll cut this first one here. And I'll try to mark it. Luckily with the twig type material here, it's a little bit forgiving. You can move it around, bend it a little bit, and then shape it more to your liking. This one here. Okay. It's kind of a trial and error. Every time you put a piece in, you look at it, decide if it's going to fit where you want it to fit at, and then, okay, so now I've got this whole process going on here that it's going to go like that. And it's going to fit over here. I better put it in my jig to make sure things are going to fit together. We could have a three-legged bench and call it done. All right, that's looking good. This one here is going to be a little bit tricky. Because it's a curved piece fitting onto a curved piece. So. But there's a trick to that too. What I'm doing here is shaving this piece down to reduce its thickness. and that in turn makes it look like it fits a little bit better onto that piece that we're trying to match it to. Okay. Put it back onto the jig we have down here to show how wide it's going to be. And you know how Norm, he always just hits that piece and it fits in perfect. You think, man alive, I wish I could do that, but I can't. Okay, I've got to remark this one over here a little bit more to make it fit a little bit tighter, so let's go and see what happens. Actually, I made a mistake, so. Now I'm trying to cover it up. Two-legged bench. Oh, I was cutting the wrong one. You know, the old trick is whenever you make a mistake, you just put your hand on top of it and don't let anybody look at it. So there, isn't that great? Okay, we got the three legs, and the third one is just going to be right in here like this and mounted in there. So. And I'm doing that because of all these other braces that we have. You know, this one doesn't look too bad stuck in towards the center like that. Okay, so we'll mount the third one in place. That's not the third, that's the fourth. Fourth one, excuse me. You know, when the bright lights of the camera on, sometimes you just forget where you're at, so be carried away. Now I'm going to snug all these down just a little bit, but not to the point where I want to break anything. So I have leg, leg, leg. And also, right now, we're not worrying about if it actually sits flat or not, because when we're done, we turn it over and we measure from the top, which will be the flat part, and down, and then we trim the legs off to make it sit level. Okay, so we have all these twigs put together, and now what has to be done is I'm going to mark them from underneath here because I have to drill a hole and screw these into this piece of wood here so that everything sits in the right position. So there, and I think this one here, it looks so good right there. Oh, you could, you know, I would stand on these. They're strong enough to do this, but you know, when you do something like this, there's no insurance policy on it. So you think, well, okay, but the wood is strong, it's stable, and as long as you put it together in a decent fashion, they're pretty strong. But you know, and you could sit on them too, but you wouldn't want to use them for a ladder because of, well, I guess if you feel strong enough about it, you could, but that's what ladders are for. Okay, next thing we're going to do then is we're going to put some screws down through here to hold these in place. And I'll take a break for a second. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to button these pieces down here where the angle braces are going into the seat. Now we'll kind of start locking things together. I'm using a smaller bit to anchor these. I'll come over here and do this one first. And Remember, since this is native lumber here, you get a lot of, anytime you drill through that, you get some heat build up, and that, if there's any moisture in the wood, it turns to steam, so you see a little bit of smoke. And it's not really fire, it's just steam. Yeah, I'm going through and trying to get the pilot holes drilled for all of them. And okay, we got that part done. Now we'll use some screws here to run them in. This starts locking everything together now, so it's going to do a little bit of a tighten up for us. And then you find out where you messed up at. And that seems to be the case sometimes. So. One, two, three. Okay, now this for this piece here comes into this one here. I'll set that down. Use a little bit different bit and drill through that. Start out with a pilot hole. And you can line this up by eye. A little bit like going to the dentist, drilling out those nasty spots. This is screw I want to hide a little bit, so I countersink it into the leg. And now we'll use one of those larger drywall screws to anchor it in place. And this goes into the pilot hole that's snug that down. Okay, and then we go back and see if we get those to fit back into our jig. Turn it back around where it was before. Okay. Anytime you do this, things are going to move around a little bit. One leg will pull in a little bit just because maybe the brace has been cut a little bit different. So we're just trying to get everything snug up the way it's supposed to be. The next thing we do then is we have the bottom piece, and we're going to try to fit it into it. And remember, these pieces, they always change, and things are sometimes a little bit different than when you start out. So we're going to try to make this piece here fit, and this is kind of like a custom cut where you cut it to fit where it's going to go at. So what I'm trying to do right now is just kind of get an idea of how much wood has to be removed so that this will fit into place. This particular leg here in the back in here is pulled in a little bit more than it should, so that's going to present a little bit of a problem, but heck. Yeah, I lost my pencil again, so.
Sleeve.
Oh, it's where?
In your pocket.
See, that's what happens when you have a pencil that almost matches your shirt color, and then you can't find it when you need it. So,
Camouflage.
what can I say? All right, so I'm going to take this piece here, and what I want to do is I don't want the bottom of this to fit outside of the legs, and since these are splayed in a little bit, what I'm going to do is simply decide where that's at and make a little mark here, and then I'm going to trim this piece down to fit inside here a little bit more. 1.5. There we go. And I can eyeball on this, say, yeah, okay. All right, so we're going back to the bandsaw here. Got my safety glasses on. Trim this piece off a little bit. Fingers out of the way. Piece for the stove, right there we are, okay. What I want to do is take this particular piece here, and I want it to fit onto these legs. So what I'm doing is trying to get an idea of the angle of the legs. That fits like that. Got a little bit of a curve. Whoa, Nelly. So this is going to fit inside here. How am I going to do that? I don't know, but take this back out. I'm going to turn it upside down. Okay, we cut this to fit inside there, and well, they don't match up there. That's why they call it custom, man. So we're going to go back here. And now we're starting to go through the process of fitting, and I just want to get this to try to fit in here and see how it's going to go, and then you decide how much you want to cut off and where you want it to be at. Okay, and there's several different ways we can start cutting this out. Sometimes we chisel that, sometimes I use a saw, but what I'll do is just kind of keep trimming away. And remember now, the legs are at an angle here, so I'm going to try to cut off the top edge of this here and not as much off the bottom, so it'll try to fit a little bit snugger in the position it should be. Have to lift this up a little bit. Don't show that part. Don't show that part. Okay, back into the fitting process. Start fitting these pieces together. And you just keep marking where you think it should be, where more material should be removed at. I'm just going to mark this top edge here. Okay. And now I'm going to take a saber saw, which cuts a little bit more of a tighter cut. I guess I should plug it in. Okay. I just kind of nibbled away at it, and this process probably takes the longest part. Okay, now we've got that piece cut. We're going to simply kind of put it in the position that we want it to be in. And now the hard part is trying to make sure that it's flat. And the easy part about doing that is I'm going to take a little tri-square here, and I'm going to use this as my depth gauge. So I want the bottom shelf to be the same distance all the way around. And I'm simply using this as like a depth gauge then. So, okay, from here to here, and then it should be the same distance. Oops. Same distance here, and the same distance here, and the same distance here. Now, it's not doing it, and that's okay, because what I'm going to do is use this measurement to drill the legs out, so that I know that wherever I drill this at, that's where it's going to make it level. So the shelf is going to fit in. So that was pieces 3/4 of an inch thick, and I want to go to the middle, so I subtract 3/8 from that. Okay, from here I'm going to make a mark, and that's where I'm going to drill a hole, and that goes into the shelf. Same way on this side over here, into the shelf. So all these screw holes are the same distance from the bottom of the seat. Oops, we want to be over here. There, and a little waggy one there. Okay, so now if I drill a hole through here to match this, the hole here is the same distance from the top. I keep saying seat, but remember that's just the top of the shell. So now we need to drill a hole that goes through there. So we'll get the old drill out. Yeah, what can I say? It's a good place to put it. Not good. What the heck, we'll just keep going. Usually the director yells cut and the producer redoes the whole scene, but it's a low budget show. Okay, so I'm going to drill holes here, and they're going to be at an angle because I want to angle into that shelf part that we have there. I guess I better plug it in. All right, I need to support this a little bit, so we're coming off the top here, and oh, there it is. Okay. You know, when Norm does this, he has all those fancy tools, all the delta and everything else, and I'm just waiting for him to call. All right, I hope I did it right. So now we have those 4 holes. Let's see what happens. I'm kind of nervous here. Pick that shelf up again. Get 4 screws. Find out if it's going to work or not. There's one. Two. This is the tricky part here. Uh-oh. And I got one over here that kind of pushed out a little bit. And same way here. All right, so now we have the shelf in place. And have that situated there, and right now it doesn't look like it's sitting flat. What do you think? Not flat, right? Okay. So what we're going to do then is we're going to cut the legs to match the distance from the top of the seat, and that should make it pretty much level. And if you set it outside in a flower bed, it won't matter at all. So move this off to the side.
We got about 3 minutes to tape left.
Okay. Should I keep going?
Yeah, I'll just.
Okay.
Let's tell you when we're done.
Here we go. I'm going to mark 12 inches from the top. 12 inches from the top. That one's about right. That one's about right. And that one's a little off. So now what I have to do is I have to start cutting these to kind of match. And you always got to watch out. Sometimes you cut too much off and keep going, and the whole thing falls apart. Okay, if it goes back and forth this way, I know that I got to cut this back one here off. And I got to cut it off some more. I'm going to cut that one a little bit. Okay, now we have a flap. We're starting around a little bit of time, and what can be done in is all these can be sanded. We still have the screw holes to fill in, and my secret weapon for doing that is I use pieces of tree limb, twigs, and I just get ones that are about the right size, and I use those for dowels. So I go over and I cut them off about the right thickness. Got to watch your fingers though. I go ahead and cut them, let them fall to the floor. Make sure the saw is turned off. Pick up these little wood plugs. And then put a little glue in the glue hole and then simply slide them in place. And the neat thing is you just give them a little tap and you fill those in. Let them stick out a little bit. And then you fill the holes in like that, and go around to all the rest of them, do the same thing, and then you have a little bench there that is relatively strong, but don't use it for a ladder. Okay, here's what it looks like in kind of a finished state. It doesn't have a varnish or sealer on it, but simply the pieces are put together. Top's been sanded down. As you see, the wood plugs are in the holes there to fill in. Remember, just use those little tree limbs, and sand it down a little bit to your desire around the edges, and put your finish on and you're ready to go. Now there's some different things you can do and different ways to put these together. This is one basic way to do it. Another way to dress it up a little bit more is to take ceramic tile, those extra pieces, remember, that you have around, and someday you're going to need them, or someday you're going to use them and it never happens. Well, take those and put them down on the top and on the shelf underneath here and put those together. Now instead of using the angled pieces, if I just have straight limbs here, I take little twigs in and simply insert them, drill the holes, stick them in there, and use them as a decorative design for three surfaces in. Also in this particular one, we took a tree limb and cut it in half and then nailed it into the side or screwed it into the side to give it a little bit better design. So that's something you can do, and if you really get crazy then, here's one here with the bark still on that's been varnished, and we simply took a couple pieces here and used them as a stretcher just like you would in a regular chair, and then put those together. These are tenoned together. That means one is holes drilled and it's inserted into the other one, and then they're nailed or pinned together. The neat thing about this one here is this was a piece of firewood that was split, and I used it then as a seat and sanded a little bit. So it's just simply a rough piece of wood. Happens to be walnut, and used it as the seat part for the bench. So there's all different kinds of ways you can put these together, all different materials you can use, and they all work. So plant stands and different types of displays are a great thing to do. So a little bit of spider web there. So you're all set. Just go ahead and try it and see what happens. Remember, you can't make a mistake. Okay, thank you. I'm Greg Summers, and thank you for watching.